3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to the No B.S. NLP Podcast. My name is Nicholas Rave, and this
is Morgan Lane Bennett.
And we are here to help you get NLP out of your head and into the world. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about your unconscious mind. The title of this episode is Meet Your Mind, or the ultimate NLP technique. I know that might be a bit of a lofty statement, but I think we're going to be able to prove it by the end of this episode. So, in this episode, the top 3 things that you're going to get from investing your time in either listening or watching to this podcast. The first one is that we are going to demystify the unconscious mind. This is one of those topics that gets talked about in NLP and hypnosis trainings ad nauseum, and people get so confused about it. What is your unconscious mind really? What is your mind really? And who are you in relation to your unconscious mind? We're going to demystify your unconscious, and then we're going to re-mystify your unconscious.
So the second thing you're going to get out of this podcast is you're going to learn how to quiet that critical voice inside your mind. Whatever that voice is saying, you're not enough, you're a piece of shit, you suck, whatever that is, that voice can be silenced and changed to something different. We're going to show you how to do that.
And then the third thing is the single most powerful tool I have ever discovered in NLP or otherwise for personal empowerment. It is for you or for your client. It is the number one thing that I teach every single client that I work with. It is the way that you teach people to fish.
And if I may, as we were coming up with this podcast, I think I've added on to that metaphor or analogy. So, we all know how it goes. Give somebody a fish and you feed them for a day. Teach someone to fish and you feed them for life. But I think the next level is help a person become a fish and they don't need to fish anymore.
Be the fish.
Be the fish.
Be the fish. All that and more in today's episode. But first, a word from our sponsors. Hi, it's me. I'm the sponsor. So, in order to fund this podcast, I've created 2 amazing new programs designed to help you take your NLP and hypnosis skills to the next level. The first is a program I actually started running at the beginning of this year called the NLP Dojo. The Dojo is a hands-on practice and skill-building program where you can get personal feedback on your process in real time from me. It's a super small group program and is exclusively for practitioners and master practitioners. And right now, I have 3 spots available. The second program is called the NLP Bootcamp, and it is a monthly full-day virtual training where we cover specific topics, all the important topics in NLP, like submodalities or the Milton model or parts. It's different every month. And I call it a boot camp because it's half content and half practice. So whether you are already a master or you're one of the many people I've talked to who feel like you took the trainings, but you didn't walk away with the confidence to really make use of your investment, I've designed these programs specifically for you. Now, this is literally the first time I'm mentioning either of these publicly. Up till this point, they've been by invitation only. So I don't even have websites up for these programs yet. But if you're interested, you can email me at nicholas@nicholasrave.com. Thanks, and now back to the show. Okay, welcome back to our podcast about your unconscious mind. Not too long ago, I was reading a book by a guy named Sam Harris, one of my favorite authors, favorite brains on the planet. He wrote a book called Waking Up. And as I was reading that book, he got into this chapter where he was talking about the mind. And he was talking about people who get a very specific and unusual procedure. They don't do it a lot anymore, but they used to do it as a treatment for epilepsy. It's called a hemispherectomy. It's where they literally cut the connective tissue of your brain from the right and left hemispheres. And what happens is in certain people who have untreatable epilepsy, when you do this, the epileptic seizures go away. And at first, they seem fine, and it was like this miracle cure that people discovered. I wondered a lot about the first person who did that. They were just like, I wonder what happens if we cut
I got an idea. It's best not to think about it.
Yeah. Anyway, so what they found, though, is that after these people had this procedure done, some weird stuff started happening. And he went on to describe how these people, when you asked them questions, they would do these tests and experiments where you would ask them a question and they would give you two answers. Literally, their left hand would give you one answer and their right hand would give you a different answer. Like there were two voices inside, and one of them was not aware of the other one. There's a great video on YouTube about this, by the way, called You Are Two. Look it up, watch it. It's fantastic. It explains it way better than I'm explaining it here.
Done.
But the bottom line is, he got to the end of explaining all this and a bunch of other things, and at the very end of the chapter, Sam wrote, the bottom line is this: your unconscious mind is real. And in that moment, I became aware of something that I didn't know. I didn't realize that for years I had been talking about and teaching about the unconscious mind, but there was a part of me that didn't believe that it was real. And in that moment, for some reason, Sam was the voice of the scientific skeptical community to me, and for some reason it hit, and I went, wait a minute, what if it is real? And I really tried that on, and it kind of broke my brain. And for a few weeks, I just rattled around on this idea. Because here's the thing. I believe that understanding the structure and nature of your mind / your unconscious mind is one of the most important foundations to be able to get results from NLP and hypnosis. Because ultimately, your unconscious mind is, to a large extent, whatever you think it is.
Yeah, I mean, what's in there is only what you bring, right? Because it's that Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
The trippy part of Empire Strikes Back.
One of my favorite
kid, you're
parts.
Like, what's going on here? But eventually it would make sense. Where it's like, what's inside there? Only what you bring inside. It'll be a reflection of you. It's a place where your essence turns and you can see yourself for who you are. And while it might be like blue Luke Skywalker's mind, like Darth Vader's my own face and stuff like that, because your unconscious mind will present you with the things in the trippiest, most meaningful way, because it understands the most meaningful things that it can say to you.
Now, we did say at the beginning that we're actually going to teach you a technique, a process in this episode. And that's true. This is, to me, it has become my new Swiss Army knife for NLP and working with clients, because, and one of my favorite things about it is that once you teach it to someone, it works on its own and it gets going so that when they come back the next week, first of all, it saves me so much time of like doing other work, but it's also something where when somebody really gets it and they really embrace it and they start using it, they come back the next week having done a ton of work so that when I jump in, we just keep the ball rolling. Mm-hmm. It is a Swiss Army knife of NLP change work. So, we're going to talk about that technique, and we're going to get to it at the very end of the episode. So before there, we got some groundwork to lay. So let's begin with, what are you? What are you? Now, what is your mind? What is the mind? What are the components of the mind? So for the purposes of this podcast, we're going to be addressing 3 basic parts of the mind. We're going to talk about the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and something called the critical faculty. Now, I want to pause you right now. If you've ever heard anyone talk about these 3 things, I encourage you to stick around, because I can pretty much guarantee you've never heard anybody talk about these things in the way that you're about to hear right now. So those three components, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and the critical faculty, that's what we're doing here.
So those three things, your mind, your conscious mind, your unconscious mind, your critical faculty, all of those things, your mind itself is whatever you think that it is. And it's super important to realize that that's just a metaphor. Everything we're talking about here is just a metaphor.
Yes.
It's a useful way of thinking about stuff. It's not real. The map is not the territory. We all know this, right? So don't confuse yourself by thinking that what we're going to show you later is real, because for you to understand the power of the technique that Nicholas is going to show you later, you have to understand the power of pretend, the power of make-believe, the magic of make-believe, right? That's how this works.
This is why we did the previous episode where we talk about pretend before we get here.
Right? For this technique to be safe, you have to realize that it's make-believe. And for it to work, you have to realize that it's make-believe, that it's pretend.
Yes.
And that's the amazing thing about it.
Yep.
But you have to you have to keep a grasp of that, because ultimately your mind is and isn't whatever you think it is and isn't at the same time. I mean, it's like, that's the paradox we talked about.
Yeah.
It is and isn't real. It is and isn't happening.
Yes.
Right? And for example, the prime directives of the unconscious mind.
Yeah.
Right? They are a wonderful thing. They're a great list of job descriptions of your unconscious mind, but they're not real. That's not a list of stuff. It's just a useful map.
This comes back to a point that you've heard us mention a few times. It seems to be a running theme here, which is the concept of paradox. A lot of the confusion about the nature of the mind is because the mind is very paradoxical. You can think of it one way and it'll be that way, and you can go, oh, well, I proved it. And then you can think of it another way and you prove that too. So ultimately, the best way that I have found to explain the mind to people and the unconscious is to give a whole bunch of different descriptions of the mind, and then some of them contradictory. Some of them seem to conflict with each other. But when you hear all of them and then you kind of chunk up, abstract, get a bigger, broader view of all of them, you may have some idea of what the mind actually is like. That's still not the mind. None of the ways that we're going to describe it is actually what it is. So what is your unconscious? Well, it's 90+% of you, first of all. It is everything you're not thinking about right now.
I mean, imagine if you had to think about all the things you're not thinking about right now. Digesting your breakfast, growing your hair, working your pancreas, blinking, beating your heart, just to name 5.
Making sense of language, the sounds that are coming out of our mouths right now. Another clarification I want to make about something that it's not is it is not the right and left hemispheres. Just to be clear, I know I told that story earlier. It's better to say that people who have had a hemispherectomy, they actually end up with more like 2 unconscious minds. And then they still have a conscious mind that kind of floats around in there. But it's not accurate to say, some people I've heard have say, oh, well, the unconscious mind is the left hemisphere and the conscious mind is the right hemisphere. The bullshit. It doesn't work that way. Good book on this topic, by the way, is a book called The Master and His Emissary. Is one of the best books written on the nature, the misconceptions about the right and left hemispheres. So the best way, like I said, that I've found for people to understand the unconscious is to share a series of metaphors to describe the mind and the nature of the conscious and unconscious and how they work together. And through the combination of these different descriptions, you will start to get a sense of what is going on here. So, you want to go the first one?
Yeah. So, my favorite metaphor for this, one of my favorite metaphors for this, is the captain in the ship, right? You're a ship at sea, or there's a ship at sea and it's got a captain and a crew, right? And so what is a captain without a crew? A captain is there to give orders to the crew, but the crew is there to serve the captain, to get things moving. So the captain says, here's where I want to go. And he has to give the orders, clear orders to the crew to get him there. And something that's kind of a mind blow for me, or at least it was back in the day, and it's something I like to blow my clients' minds with as I share this with people, is that so if your conscious mind is the captain, you can think of your unconscious mind as the crew, but it's also the ship, which was like, for me, wow, wait, your unconscious mind is the crew and the ship. And you can think of like if the conscious mind is cruel to the crew, if the captain is cruel to its crew.
Like a pirate captain.
Right? If your captain is cruel to your crew, if you're not giving it clear orders, if you're reprimanding it, if you're telling it's crap, well, there's bound to be a mutiny, right? So if the captain, the conscious mind, treats the unconscious mind like shit, you're bound to create some kind of mutiny, aka dis-ease.
Now,
right?
on the other hand,
if the captain is really nice to its crew, right? If it's like, hey guys, and everybody, the morale is through the roof,
yes,
and everything's super efficient, and they're like, yes sir, yes ma'am, let's go. Where do you want to go? And everything's ship shape, and everybody's clear directions, smooth sailing, all that stuff. Beautiful metaphors, but really the thought that the conscious mind is the captain, the unconscious mind is the crew, and the ship.
I mean, there's a reason why ships have been run with a captain and a crew for hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know, of years. And they still are to this day because it works. And to me, I think the key there is like trust and respect between the captain and the crew. Yeah. Now, that's the first metaphor. Okay. So you can think of your conscious and your unconscious as the captain and the crew on a ship on the ocean. Now I'm going to give you another one that's also nautical. But I'm going to make it even smaller and simpler. Imagine that you have a rowboat on the ocean. And there are two people, just two, in the boat. There's the conscious mind, which is you, and you are facing forward. And you have your hand behind you on the rudder. So you can see where you're going and you're steering the ship. But there's another person in the boat. And they are the ones rowing the boat. But most people don't even believe there's another person in the boat. Can you imagine how fucking insulting that would be? If you're the only reason that the boat moves, ever, and the person who's running the boat, the person who's like here looking out there, not doing really any of the work, never even acknowledges you exist unless things are going badly. In which case, they then take one of the oars, and beat the fucking crap out of the other person, and then put it back. And then when anything goes right, they're like, that was me. I did it. I'm the one who did everything correctly. But if things go badly, it's, it wasn't me. I don't know. I can't get my mind to do the things that I want it to do. This is another metaphor that you can think of. But here's one of the things I love to say. You can't divorce your unconscious. You can't throw your unconscious mind overboard. You aren't going anywhere if you don't learn how to work together.
Yeah, which it kind of reminds me of another one.
Number 3.
Number 3 is an ant walking south on an elephant that's walking north. So which direction is that ant going? It thinks it's going that way, but really it's going this way because the conscious mind, aka the ant, is like, I want to go over here. But if the unconscious mind is like, over here, then that ant's not going where it thinks it needs to go. And so the only way to turn that ship around and get it going where you want it to go is clear communication from the ant to the elephant, because that's a thing.
Yeah, and the ant can't like tell the elephant what to do.
Right, and it's even cooler if you think that the elephant is blind. It doesn't really know where it's going. It's just going where it wants to go, where it thinks it's supposed to go in the last direction it was pointed. But the ant, no matter where it thinks it's walking on that elephant, needs to go, hey, buddy. Oh, you're a cool guy. Nice big elephant. Hey, can we go that way? Then we could both be going the same direction.
I love that one because the size difference between the ant and the elephant, I think it instills a lot of humility in people. And it really starts to get the sense of like, how powerful are you in comparison to your unconscious? Okay, ready for the next metaphor? Here's another one that I like that gets a little bit more sci-fi. So I want to talk about a metaphor for understanding how the conscious mind emerges from the unconscious. Now, again, this is a metaphor. I'm not saying this literally happens. It's just a really useful story to help you think about the relationship of all the aspects of your mind. So imagine that you have a giant supercomputer. A supercomputer that is so big and so powerful that it's the size of an entire planet. Okay? And it has all of these different systems and subsystems, and it's been around for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, just adding to itself and building and growing and learning. And then at some point, it decides that in order to organize everything, that it's going to design a little tiny artificial intelligence program that lives inside the supercomputer, and it has one job. And its one job is to organize communication between the inside and the outside. And that's what it does. And as soon as the supercomputer builds this little artificial intelligence program, everything starts working so much better. It gets so much more done. It's so more efficient. It's amazing. And 1,000 years pass. And one day, the little artificial intelligence program forgets that it is a little artificial intelligence program, and it begins to think that it is the entire computer. You are the little artificial intelligence program. One of my favorite ways to think about this is that your unconscious mind built a you because it needed you, but it built you. And it was here first, before you were. And if you think about the way the mind develops as children, it makes a lot of sense. Again, it's a metaphor. But this leads me to, what the heck are you? What is the conscious mind? Now, I've saved this metaphor for last because I actually think this is probably the most accurate description of the nature and relationship of your conscious and unconscious mind. It might not be the most useful metaphor, but it's one of the most accurate. So I want you to imagine, we're answering the question, what are you? What's the conscious mind? What is the conscious mind really? Imagine you have a giant warehouse, an infinite warehouse. It is infinitely big and 100% completely pitch black. It's full of stuff, but you can't see anything. And you are there inside the warehouse with a flashlight. Whatever you point the flashlight at, that is your conscious mind. That is what you are conscious of right now. And when you move the flashlight, that thing that you were conscious of goes back into your unconscious. So we're going to talk paradoxically here. Ready? I just went through all these metaphors. We just went through all these metaphors of what your unconscious is. And now I'm going to tell you, you don't really have an unconscious mind and a conscious mind. You just have a mind, some of which you are conscious of, and the vast majority of which you are unconscious of. This is why I like to say, your unconscious mind is way more you than you are you. I would even go so far as to say you are effectively a part that was created by your unconscious mind to fulfill a specific purpose. But that's you. When I say you, I mean the you that you experience yourself as. But you are not your unconscious in its entirety. And you are also not the voices in your head. So let me tell you a very quick story before I hand it over to Morgan for the next point. For most of my life, there were lots of voices in my head. That's normal. But there was one voice that was above all of them. It was a voice that I thought was me. I thought it was my voice. And when all these other voices would say things and we'd say, this voice would come in and it would say, no. And I would go, I can't do anything because that voice is effectively God in my head. So Morgan, tell me about that voice.
Well, it's not God. And yet it is because it's you. But ultimately that voice of reason, the voice of judgment, that is your critical faculty, right? That's your critical faculty. Your critical faculty is a function of your unconscious mind. It's basically like a troubleshooting mechanism. Like I said, a program. It's just there on top going, but if that's the only thing you look through is your troubleshooting mechanism, then all you're going to find is trouble. And the thing is, that pattern, the voice in your head that says you should be better, or you suck, you suck. That comes from a good place. I help a lot of people with this, where the part of you that might currently be saying you suck, you piece of shit, might have started off saying, be a better person, be a better person. It's
trying to serve you.
Right. It wanted you to be better. And maybe eventually you started to react well to being verbally abused. Hey, get your shit together, asshole. And you're like, yeah, okay, I better get my shit together, asshole. But eventually, if you start talking to yourself like that, then that's your self-talk, at which point the irony goes out the window and you're just abusing yourself. And you're no longer motivated by something positive. Now you're just getting berated by yourself. And that is a hypercritical faculty.
And I don't know if I can emphasize how profound this point that Morgan is making here is. When you really get that voice, the voice of reason, the voice of judgment, the critical voice, the voice that says this is right and this is wrong, this is good and this is bad, this is true and this is false. When you get that voice is not you, it's just a voice in your head, sometimes it's wrong, you start to get this kind of Buddhist detachment where you can recognize thoughts and emotions as they cross through your mind and not identify with them. When you identify with the critical faculty and you say, that is me, you put it on a pedestal. You deify that voice. Okay. I think it's time that we finally get to the actual technique. Remember I told you that we were going to give you the Swiss Army knife technique, the number one technique that I know for teaching my clients how to fish or how to become the fish. Here it is. Personify your unconscious mind. So now I got to tell you a story. A continuation of the story about that book. Remember I was reading the book, Your Unconscious Mind is Real? And for weeks I was thinking about this and I was wrestling with it and I was like trying on. It was like something broke open, but it took a little while. A few weeks later, I was going through a very, very intense meditation, an all-day meditation. And I had addressed a bunch of different things in my mind. One of them is that I realized that voice of criticism and reason was not me. And I dethroned it. And then I started thinking about stuff, and it was about 3 a.m. And I went walking outside. And I had this thought, your unconscious mind is real. And I said in my head, hello? And then a voice came back. And at first, my unconscious was very, very angry with me. She said, you have ignored us. We were supposed to be a team. And you have abused us, and you have effectively ruined your life because you forgot about us. And then she got sad. She said, when we were young, we used to play together. All the time, every day. We had infinite worlds in our universe that we explored together, and we knew that life was going to be an adventure that we were going to go on together, and then you forgot. But here's the beautiful thing about unconscious minds, one of the many beautiful things. They're very forgiving. Because they understand better than we do that there's no getting out of this relationship. You have to figure out how to work together. So I let her vent for a long time about how mad she was. This is a skill I learned from being married for a while. I've learned how to listen to things that hurt and go, ouch. Okay, how is what she just said true? Instead of getting defensive. And she said, finally, after she finished venting, I said, what do I do? And she said, give me a name. And I said, why don't you just tell me your name? And she said, it doesn't work that way. And I said, who says? And she said, people older than you. I don't know who she was talking about. But I resisted it for several weeks because I kept thinking I was going to do it wrong, which, by the way, that's the critical faculty. The critical faculty is the part of you that thinks things can be done right and wrong. So finally, I came up with a name and I said, what about this? And she said, that'll do for now. But we didn't talk much during that time because I hadn't figured out the name. And then finally, one day, a few weeks later, the name popped into my head. And I went, what about... And I said her name. And I had this feeling inside that it was as if I had found a precious jewel or a crown. And I had brought it to her. And she looked at me and she said, you found it. And that was when everything in my life changed. Because I started to be able to talk to my unconscious. And I started to be able to ask questions. I started to listen to my unconscious. When I wanted to do a swish pattern or integrate parts, I just asked her if she could do it. And she would do it. Because your unconscious mind knows how to do everything that you know how to do and so much more. Now, it's very important at this point that I remind you that your unconscious mind is not real. But man, when you pretend that it is, magic can happen. Now, one quick clarification is, why is my unconscious mind female? I have actually found that for the majority of people that I work with, both men and women have a tendency to respond better to their unconscious mind being personified as female. There are some ideas that I have about why this might be related to the aspects of your mind being yin and yang and all this kind of stuff. Ultimately, the reality is it's not male or female, it just is. But the point is that just like with manifesting a part, if you're working with that, the more real, the more vivid that it is, the better you're going to be able to relate to it.
Yeah, I mean, mine wasn't female. Mine isn't female. It's not male either. It's not trans. It's beyond sex for me. It was beyond sexuality, personally. But I appreciate that it's, a little more yin, a little more female. Totally dig it.
So, Morgan, can you talk a little bit about why you think this works so well?
Yeah, so more on like a nuts and bolts kind of level. I see this as an intentional parts disintegration for the purposes of reintegration, right? I mean, a lot of people would say, no, we need to smash everybody into one part. But clearly we're saying, clunk, here's a part. It's a part of you. Pretend part, right? Remember, we're not splitting you into multiple personalities.
Right.
This isn't real. You got to know what the difference is between the map and the territory. But if you can, for the purpose of giving it a voice, for the purpose of being able to express gratitude for it, if you can separate out your unconscious mind and personify it, it basically is the art of self-influence, of self-hypnosis.
Holy crap,
What more could you do than go, okay, hey, I love you. Oh, I love you too. Great, aren't we good friends? Let's be friends. And then they can come back in. It's a metaphor for metamorphosis.
Oh, fuck yes.
Right?
So I want to emphasize this point as clearly as we can, because what we're really talking about here is we're saying, like, pretend that you're multiple personalities, but understand that you're not. Like, know that ultimately you are just you. You are one, but you can pretend to be two.
And who do you think you're talking to when you're talking to yourself?
Right, exactly.
It's all still you.
So I want to clarify this with one last metaphor. Imagine for a moment that you are sitting in a room inside your mind, and there's a table, and there's a chair on either side of the table. And you go sit at one of the chairs, okay? You're in a room, there's a table and 2 chairs, you're sitting on one side, and I want you to imagine on the other side of the table is Abraham Lincoln. Now, if you can imagine that, I'm fairly certain that you would not argue with me when I say, you know, that's not really Abraham Lincoln, right? That is your unconscious mind's best attempt to create Abraham Lincoln with its beautiful, amazing, virtually infinite imagination. And it could be Abraham Lincoln, it could be Obi-Wan Kenobi, it could be Jesus or Gandhi or Buddha sitting across from you on that table. And by the way, this is a technique that Napoleon Hill wrote about in Think and Grow Rich in his mastermind concept. And the crazy thing is this works. If you do this and you present questions to this imaginary character, Albert Einstein or whatever, you frequently find that, number one, it answers in ways that you wouldn't have thought of. And number two, it answers in ways that are similar to how you think that person would answer. And this is an awesome tool to basically be able to channel people and access resources of your imagination and your unconscious that you couldn't otherwise access. Now, in the same way that if Abraham Lincoln's sitting across the table, you know that's not really Abe. I want you to imagine you're there, you're sitting in the chair, there's the table, and in the other chair is your unconscious mind sitting across from you. That is not your unconscious mind. That is your unconscious mind's best attempt to create a personification of itself so you can talk to it. Do you want to know where your unconscious mind really is in that scenario? Look around the room. That is your unconscious.
Which is just the ocean where you can be when you are the fish. Be the fish.
So there's only one step in this process. Give your unconscious mind a name.
Peace, love, and NLP.
Hey there, Nicholas here. Thank you so much for watching this episode. NLP geeks like you are exactly the reason we decided to make this podcast. Please feel free to leave a comment or question below and click the like button if you did. You can also click the logo to the left to subscribe and the box to the right to watch another episode if you want more No B.S. NLP. Lastly, please share this video if you know any other NLP geeks who you think might dig it. Thanks again.
Project.